Hi everyone, it's Theodora and I'm here with Peter Randsman to talk about when is the right time to look for an agent and what steps to take if it is the right time. He is the founder of Randsman Artist Management and he's responsible for over 50 successful international careers. His singers have sung at houses like the Metropolitan Opera, La Scala, Chicago Lyric Opera, and Vienna State Opera, among others. He is also highly sought after for his master classes, consultation, and career coaching. Peter, thank you so much for being here today.
I couldn't be more excited to be here, and I really feel honored that you chose me and reached out to me, and I thank you so much for this, and I think it's such a fantastic idea what you're doing. So glad to be here.
Thank you, thank you. So you are an agent, you manage singers who have sung all over the world in major companies, and the point of these videos is kind of to reach out to young artists and give them an idea of what to expect. Do you have any advice on what they should think about and how they should prepare when they're coming to a point where they can think about getting an agent?
That is such a great question. Okay. The most important thing for me, okay, is that these artists, when they're ready to come to me, have checked in with their support team. And I worry sometimes that artists don't understand what I mean by a support team. So I want to really spell this out. Their voice teacher, of course, a coach, their main coach, but not just any coach. I want a coach that will really dot every I, cross every T, and to be honest, correct them. Tell them if they're singing flat or sharp. Tell them if the languages and the musicianship and the style are not up to par, and work with them to get that to the point where they're ready for management. And then you reach out to maybe somebody who's a consultant who's both physically and emotionally disconnected in a different area. I do consulting, as you know me, that's how you met me. And there are many people that come to me through their voice teachers and say, Peter, I have an artist who's, in their last year at school, and I believe they're ready, and they've worked really hard with me and with their coach, but we like you who's more impartial to just sit down and tell us what you think. And that is what I think is important. I think sometimes that artists, become so excited that they put themselves in front of companies a little bit too early, and that does them a disservice. So I believe it's most important to have your team, your voice teacher, your coach that's definitely going to make sure to dot every I and cross every T, and possibly a professional in the business who does consulting, who knows what's going on out there in the opera world. And that will give you the energy and the feel about where you were at that time. And if it still needs to be 6 more months of hard work, you know it then. And information is power. Might be a cliche, but it's true. You come back after working with a consultant and they speak to your teacher and say, take another 6 months to 8 months. It is so empowering to know that you're that close and that it's just this final 10 or 15%, okay? And then it's ready to go. That's my thought. And that way, when the artists are that kind of prepared, what I look for is artistry, individual artistry, spontaneity, which is something that I have always seen and heard once I started my listening back when I was 9 years old, of singers, many of them born in the 1870s, singing in 1910 and 1920. It was the golden age of singing, and there was a sense of spontaneity and of individual vocal personalities. And that's what I want to see. And that's what I think singers need. The young singers of today need the permission to be their own artist, both vocally and histrionically and stylistically. Also, when singers sing for me, what interests me towards considering them for putting them on my roster is a sense of understanding each one of the styles and the idioms. My Lord, it's complicated. French opera, German opera, contemporary English opera, Russian opera, Czech opera, the Wagner, Strauss, all the various styles and languages. And it's having your 8 or 10 arias, embracing all of those styles. Let's not forget that most of the opera companies, almost all of them now, are doing one Gilbert and Sullivan and one legit musical theater piece, or even non-legit musical theater piece. And when I started in the business, I'm thinking 32 years ago with Paul Cote, who was my mentor, opera companies were not barely doing any Gilbert and Sullivan, and certainly no musical theater. But it's changed. Our world, our musical world and operatic world has changed. So in addition to being able to sing in all the styles and languages I just mentioned, there's also making sure to include legit musical theater, Rodgers and Hammerstein, Rodgers and Hart, maybe some Sondheim, a little more contemporary, and find one Gilbert and Sullivan piece that works for you. And it's funny because a number of singers I work with over the past 5 or 6 years, they're like, Peter, I've never sung any musical theater. And it's like they together, we're working together, exploring that repertoire. Same thing with many of the opera singers I work with say to me, I have never worked or sung any Gilbert and Sullivan. I'm like, it's a whole new world. Let's find one piece for you that works on Gilbert, and you will add your Gilbert and Sullivan, your legit musical theater piece, your Sondheim piece, in addition to all the other pieces. You may have 10 or 12 pieces. I call it a menu. That's your full menu, and that's what you bring when you start singing for the young artist programs. No surprises. That way you don't have to learn something quickly that you haven't prepared. And then when you are ready, once your voice teacher, your coach who's tough on you, and the consultant who you trust, and that team of those three tell you it's time, then you take that very, very beautiful menu of all those pieces of the various styles that you've worked hard on, and that's what you, number one, put on your website, so that once you start sending, emails and mailings or whatever out to agents, you send it. So all of those videos of you singing, all of that is there for them to see, in hope that then it will then generate a live audition. Does that help?
That definitely helps. Thank you. I guess my follow-up question to that is, what do you expect from a video? Are there certain parameters that a singer should adhere to so that a video is successful?
Yes, but I mean, it's a good question, and at the same time, the identical answer that I just gave, which is what I expect in a video, which is, I don't think, asking any more than what I just asked, which is, make sure, here's a real bugaboo of mine. There are certain singers I know that I've kept my eye on, and when I know them, we know each other from Facebook and from seeing them locally in some of the wonderful companies in New York, and I'm quote unquote keeping an eye on them for consideration for the future. And I'll see on their websites, they'll put themselves up, or on Facebook singing, and it's not their best. Let's face it, I was a professional singer for 16 years. I sang at New York City Opera and national tours, and I sang, musical theater and opera as well. And I knew when it wasn't my best day, don't, you know what I'm saying? But I'm finding that some singers are overusing Facebook and some of this, and putting an aria of them not in their best day, or when it's not fully coached or ready. And they have to remember there are casting directors and agents and artistic directors of opera companies through the other people that they know that are seeing that. Think about it before you put that up. And that also applies to the websites. Don't just pop something on a website. And I know it can be for an artist very, very frustrating that they spend all that money for 1 hour for an engineer, video and audio, to tape, their arias. But sometimes you only get 1 or 2 out of that session. You have to just do it again in 2 months, because I see people taking all 6 of them and popping them on their website, and 2 of them are really representative of the level they are at that could conceivably entice an agent to want to hear them for consideration for the roster. But then 4 of the other arias they're a bit tired, it wasn't their best day, they weren't feeling well. You know, we're just human. I mean, I was a singer for all those years, so I still consider myself an artist. And it's like, I know what it's like when you don't feel well. So, but we have to be honest with ourselves, which comes to record everything. Record everything, not under the guise of patting ourselves on the back, saying, gee, that's great. We know that you're great because you're in the business and you're being considered and people are talking about you. Record it and watch it under the guise of, I sang flat on my passaggio and the G's, the repeated G's. I didn't realize that. I'm going to underline that in my score. Use that as a tool to bring you to be able to fix technically and bring that to your teacher and fix it. In other words, information is power. Although it feels like it's negative information, really from negative comes positive.
Would you say that it's better, for example, to have 2 really great videos and then say you have other takes that were just audio? Is that still a good thing to put on your website, or are you expected to have only video? And
most people now only have video, but I would have no problem if there are 2 outstanding, fully representative audios of the artist doing 100% of what they're able to bring in their voice lessons and coachings and technically transfer all of that to a video if they wanted to supplement with maybe 2 or 3 audios that are equally as good and representative. Be careful to the singers, I'm saying, be careful if you've got those 2 excellent videos, putting in audios that are not quite as good, or maybe they're from 2 years ago and you thought they were reasonable, or thinking, well, from 2 years ago, here's Sempre Libre, and that they can hear my E flat, but it's not as good as what I'm doing now. Don't put it up. Just in 2 months, go back to the studio, or 3 months, you know what I mean? I understand that it costs money, but it's a process. Better with 2 representative, excellent videos. And if you want to supplement with audio, make sure it's of the same level.
when it comes to a resume that you're looking at, does it matter what sort of experience is on there?
Here's the deal. I am different, like we all are very different. All agents and managers have different expectations. I know some people would like to deal with artists only that have done a number of young artist programs. You know, everybody has different requirements. So I'll speak only for me, okay? I don't care about where you've sung. I don't care about what young artist programs you've done. I give everyone the benefit of the doubt, and I've done this in the 32, 33 seasons I've done this. I can't remember, 32 or 33. And somebody sends me something, I will go to their website and look it all over and listen. Because if I see somebody that's done 9 young artist programs that are illustrious, and then I watch maybe 4 or 5 different arias and I see them through, sometimes I'm a bit disappointed or concerned that they're not, like what we talked about earlier, they're not prepped, they're not ready stylistically, languages a week, there's flatting and sharping, and I love the voice maybe, but it doesn't seem like it's ready. So my point, and I am getting to it, is having whatever experience they have doesn't change my reaction, negative or positive. I've had situations many times before where artists sent me their website with, you know, everything up there, and they really hadn't done many young artist programs in just a few smaller local companies wherever they lived, wherever they're from. But then they did have 5 or 6 arias from recently, you know, German, French, Italian, different styles, and I listened through all of them, and I'm very impressed. And whether or not they've ever done a young artist program doesn't color my opinion to definitely reach out to them to sing for me live.
So you've talked to everybody you need to talk to. They all say, hey, you're ready. What do you do?
You mean, what does the artist do to get through to the agent? I mean, these days, I would say, you know, email. You know, it doesn't hurt if you, number one, know anyone on that artist manager's roster, okay? That's one way that could happen. You know, a number of I'm so open to all of this because having been a singer myself and remembering what it felt like to get in increments ahead, and I remember that feeling as a manager. I want to be able to be open to doing as much rather than closing the door. So one of the ways is if you're friends with one of my artists and say to them, listen, you know my work, you've sung with me, would you mind putting in a word to Peter? I'm totally good with that. And when they do, I will hear that artist. There are voice teachers, again, like I had said earlier, voice teachers. Many that I'm friendly with and I know, and many that I have the greatest respect for that I don't know. I know their names, we know each other, but if any of them call me and say, Peter, would you hear my student? Absolutely, I'm always open to that. You know, I have to tell you, I go out and see a lot. And, you know, living in New York City, born and raised in Long Beach, Long Island, and living in New York City, literally since 1976, so I call New York City my permanent home. There are so many incredible opera companies in New York City now, so many that didn't exist 10 and 15 years ago. So I love to go out and see everything. I just enjoy it, to be supportive of the companies and to be supportive of the young singers and the new generation of singers. So many times I'll go out and see something and I'll literally wait afterwards and just say, hey, you know, how are you? Of course, the first thing I ask is, are you under management? Because if they are, I would never ask, you know, that's it. I wish them the best of luck and nice to meet you. And you have, you know, whoever your agent is, when they tell me, they're wonderful and great to meet you. But if they're not under management, I will ask them and say, look, here is my card. Would you be in touch with me? Would you be interested in singing for the roster? So that's another way. Another way is that people that work on productions, stage directors that work anywhere in the world on productions, will call me and say, I just directed this, and this person who sang Mazzetto is fantastic. You should hear him. And I say, tell him to email me and mention your name. I'll hear them. So you see, there are many different ways that I am willing to open up and hear people. Now, I can't speak for everyone else out there because many other agents might not hear people under all those circumstances, but I feel like the trade-off from when I went from performing artist, I remember singing at New York City Opera for 5 seasons, and then singing with New York City Opera National Company, and thinking as a singer, what I really want to be doing is managing and consulting and agenting. And it was so odd that that was always what I wanted. And here it is now, and my whole life changed at the age of 32. So I switched careers from a professional performing artist to this. I sang on Broadway. I did TV commercials. I was the Whopper boy on Burger King. When Burger King introduced the Whopper, I was the Whopper boy on TV for 2 years. When Minolta Camera boy for 2 years. So I had a little taste of everything. And then singing at New York City Opera was just a joy and invaluable. But I always, when I was doing all of that, singers would contact me to do a consultation. I would say, why are you contacting me? I'm a performing artist. And one day I just thought, this is good. I'm going to wave goodbye to that other part of my life. And I'm now going to embrace what I really think I'm here for. And I just thought it would be fun to tell everybody out there, for some of the people, many of them, that may not know anything about me and how I came to this.
I have 2 questions that I like to ask everybody that I interview. And one of them, which I think you really have a double insight to, is what do you wish as a singer you would have known earlier?
What I wish that I knew earlier, because I remember like the first week as an agent, no, as an assistant to Paul Cote. I have Bruce Zemsky, may he rest in peace, and Alan Green from Zemsky Green. They're dear friends from my childhood. They are the ones that sat me down and said, you need to be an agent. And they called Paul Cote. And they got me into the Cote Artist Management. And that's, so I have them to thank. But I was very naive, and I believe with talent comes 100% success immediately. And what I saw as I started working with Paul is it's so much more than that. It's timing, and unfortunately it's luck. Sometimes it's who you know, if they know you and have worked with you. They may take that artist who's worked with them and sung Octavian before and maybe bring them in to sing the composer in Ariadne rather than the few of the people they heard in audition that they don't know. That's unfortunate to me because I always feel the one that's the most talented in terms of what that role is, that's the person that should be hired. But you see, I learned very quickly. I was naive, and so there's luck, there's the ability to know people in different capacities that brings you in, and there's also something that's horrendous. I hate saying it, it makes me cringe, pecking order. You know, when I started to get singers at the Met, and some of them had to start out covering 3-line roles, and I knew that they were leading singers. And then a year and a half later, they sang smaller roles. And then 2 years later, they sang featured leading roles and then ended up singing bigger. But you have to, as a young artist, understand this, that I hate that term. I cannot, guys, listen to me. I hate that term, pecking order. But I didn't know it existed when I was a singer. You're asking me when I was a singer. So all of that to me was new and something that I learned when I spent my first year with Paul Cote at Hillier International. You know, he had, Deborah Voigt was on the roster then, and he had just finished working with Susan Dunn, and it was just, I learned so much. He was a great mentor, and he had a great sense of humor. I'll never forget, we did like a 2-hour interview. And after the 2-hour interview, I was a nervous wreck. And then he said to me, do you type? I said, no. He said, do you use a telex? I said, well, I'd let you know if I could use a telex if I knew what a telex was. I said, and he said, do you know how to use a fax machine? I said, I don't know what that is. Now remember, this was 32 or 33 years ago. So he said, I'm going to hire you. And I looked at him and I said, what? And he said, Peter, I just spent 2 hours talking to you about opera, repertoire, singers, and all the above. And I realized you know what you need to know. He said, the rest of it, you can learn on your own. And I'll never forget that. That was so scary for me. But it was it opened up my eyes. And then I went on to work with him and become his associate and a full-time agent. And then 6 years later, opened up my own business, Randsman Artist Management. So as a young singer, that was what I saw. My expectations were the great, talented people will be working right away, instantly. There are many reasons why that could happen now and won't happen. And as an artist, it's finding the wherewithal and the patience to understand all of that intellectually and not let that interrupt the flow of your creating your art and bringing the spontaneity to it without letting that part of it eclipse your ability to move forward with your artistry to be able to find your way to a roster.
Is there any advice you want to give to the young artists of today?
Yes. This is something I love to talk about. If you want to be an opera singer, I really feel that whatever point you're at now, dig down and make sure you want to do it more than anything else, more than any of the other options. I have so many singers that will come to me and say, like, I'm like 1 year away from being a doctor. I'm 2 years away from my law degree. You know, and I'm like, I got it. I understand. But make sure there is no shame. Don't do it for your mother, your grandmother, your friends, your husband, your wife, your partner. Do it for you. If you want to be an opera more than anything else in the world, an opera singer, pardon me, more than anything else in the world, good. Then you establish that first. That's a great piece of advice. The second piece of advice is, I've been saying this for years, and it's the singer's choice whether or not they want to deal with this. Living in the tri-state area is advantageous for you because you're around the New York scene. They say that New York is the center of the opera world, and I think that it is. I know some people say Berlin, there's Vienna, there's this, but I think with New York, especially with young artists, it can be one of the most important places to be. Now, am I saying you have to live in New York City? No. You can live in Connecticut, you can live in Philly, you can live 6 hours out. You know what I mean? Live in the tri-state area so that if you're 6 or even 6 hours away, that you can get in for an audition the next day. So that's one of the most important pieces of information. Another one is singers need to understand that once they do that and come to this area, unless they're lucky to have either their parents or someone funding their career, which I think is beautiful and wonderful, that they need to understand that they should be willing to do survival jobs. Now, I'm going to sound like somebody's grandmother now, but when I was singing and having my career, I had 6 survival jobs, and I worked 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it was hard to even find time to work on my voice at one point before I put enough money together. You know, I was a bouncer at a discotheque. Nobody even knows what a discotheque is. A nightclub. I was a bartender working the night shift. I worked on Broadway bartending. I worked on Broadway selling candy some nights. I worked on Broadway selling popcorn some nights. And I had a church job on Sunday mornings. And believe you me, the Randsmans were never known for getting up early on Sunday mornings. You know, so getting up at like 6 a.m. to get on a train and travel to Elmhurst, Queens, and sing my church job, which I loved. They were the greatest group of people. And that's what I did. And then I would go back to New York and sing a matinee at New York City Opera. So I was doing approximately 6 survival jobs at a time. What worries me is sometimes the singers that I work with and I speak to them about, well, what are you doing for survival work? They say to me, oh no, I only want to live off the money I would make as a singer. I hope that singers now will be more open-minded about the idea, not think about my idea as old-fashioned, but more as more today, because of what's going on out there. There's going to be a little bit of a tough time for the next year or two, realistically, because of what's going on in the opera world out there. I don't want to hit on that too much because I want to stay positive, but I want to say, be more open to the possibility of having survival jobs. You know, I had a client that was working at Walmart, and I would call that client, and they would speak to me, and a week or two later, I got them a full-year contract singing feature roles at the Met. After 6 months in Walmart. It just kept them alive so they could put food on their plate and continue to pay for their coachings. That was important, and voice lessons. And they embraced that listen, some people can do speed typing and word processing and all of this at home. Some people can do teaching English as a you know what I'm saying, online. I know a number of people that I work with, I think, are teaching English online. There are many different things to do, but be willing. And I'm not coming from a condescending point of view, because I have to be honest. For the first 3 years, and I'm not embarrassed to tell you this, for the first 3 years of Randsman Artist Management, when I was booking singers at the Met and La Scala and Vienna and Glimmerglass, I was working night shifts and working bartending. And I remember once that I had a bow tie on and I was working at Damn Yankees on Broadway with Jerry Lewis selling popcorn. And then I ran into a few agents in the business, and I thought, I'm not embarrassed to see them because I'm opening up my own business. This is my venture, and I need survival money for the next 3 years, 3 or 4 years before I can then do that. And now, thank God, I am running Randsman Artist Management for 24 years, 22 years, whatever it is. And here I am. But I always went and did those survival jobs, and I befriended people, even if they didn't know that much about opera or theater or the arts. And I met fascinating people and learned new stuff from the people I worked with, and I'm still in touch with some of them. So my piece of information, I know it's all very long-winded, but I love to give the details, is be willing to locate to the tri-state area once you've spoken to your support system of your teacher, your coach, and somebody who's a consultant. And then once you've found an agent, or even if you're looking for an agent, you're told that you're ready, come to the tri-state area so you can get to New York within 1 business day with no worry or woe, and it won't make you sick, so you can sing your best. And once you're here, find some survival jobs. That's the best advice I can think. That's really it. Oh, very important it's important to listen to the great singers of the past. I find in the classes that I do and in the consulting I do, when I say to, a Verdi soprano, are you a fan of Rosa Poncel? And they say to me, was she a stage director or a conductor? No, she was one of the greatest Verdi sopranos of the last 100 years. It's important as artists for us to know about the great singers of the past. A book that I always recommend is the greatest book ever written about opera, The Last Prima Donnas. The Last Prima Donnas, written by Lanfranco Rasponi, Lanfranco, Rasponi, Rasponi. You can get a used copy on Amazon, or you can go to Norbeck and Peters, and I think it's norpete.com, and buy a used copy. And there's also a link. It's free. It's the greatest book ever written about opera. This fellow was a critic of opera, and he accrued about 60 or 70 short 20-page bios of 60 or 70 sopranos that sang in 1910 through 1960. And he put it together along with about 200 pages about other great singers. And it is one of the greatest books ever put together. I would say everyone that sings anything at the Met has read this book once or twice. It opens up your brain and your knowledge to many singers that I never knew. And that's how I learned about them through the last prima donnas. Make a very important part of your role in aria preparation, listening to 100 great singers of the past. Sing through them. And if you don't, and your voice teachers or your coaches tell you, oh, never listen, then find another voice teacher and find another coach. That's controversial, but I agree with that and feel that from my heart.
Thank you, Peter. I really appreciate everything you've told us today. I know it's going to be useful for all the young artists out there.
Thank you so much.
For those of you at home, if you're looking to have a consultation in person or on Skype, reach out to Peter. His email is randsman@aol.com. And if you want to check out his website, it is www.randsman.com. I'm Theodora, and we've been in the wings with Peter Randsman. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel, and if you have questions you'd like me to ask in the future, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. I hope you can join us next time as we talk with Madeline Renee about her career and advice that she has for young singers.